Professor Layton vs. Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney is a crossover between two great franchises that has some blatant issues, but I love nonetheless. Released in Japan in 2012, it was a collaboration between Level 5 and Capcom, directed by Shu Takumi and Atsushi Kano, the former being the creator of Ace Attorney, who wrote and directed most games, while the latter is not. I've looked for him and barely found anything about his work, not even searching his name written in kanji. You'd think it'd be someone who directed a previous Layton game, but this man, as far as I know, had no involvement with the franchise before, and the only other job at Level 5 was directing Fantasy Life, a game that was released little under a month later. On the other hand, the writers were Takumi again and Akihiro Hino, president of Level 5 and writer, designer, and producer of every Layton game up until then. It seems Mr. Takumi was closer to the main writer of the two, per Hino's wishes. Mr. Hino was a huge fan of Ace Attorney and his creator's work, discussing the idea with him in 2009 over dinner. But the concept of a crossover game was something that came to his mind after Professor Layton was released. If he meant the first game, then it all started in February of 2007, around 5 years before the crossover was actually released. Come January of 2010, and the game officially began planning, and 4 months later, in May, Mr. Takumi was tasked with the role of co-writer, truly starting the creation of a work pushed by teamwork and a bit of rivalry between the unlikely team of companies. The game combines the main duo of the Layton saga and the original Ace Attorney trilogy in a medieval setting with knights, witches, magic, and a mix of both series' gameplay. Although it's not a seamless mix, there's a clear divide between both styles of gameplay. You have Layton-style portions where you visit different locations, talk to NPCs, and solve puzzles, then you have the trial sections where you do the usual card room stuff you could come to expect from average Ace Attorney games. They mostly keep to each other, which is fair, but it hurts to a certain extent the Ace Attorney gameplay, as there are barely any investigations done for the crimes relevant to the trials, and what little you do feels very rushed and simplified. The difficulty is also lower than average for both sides. I remember the first time I played it, I barely made mistakes, which maybe could have been the result of me getting better after playing several games, but even ignoring the actual difficulty of figuring out the solutions, there is a lot more leniency. A good portion of the puzzles cannot be failed in a way that reduces your pick-a-rats, while the trials let you use coins to get hints in the same way as puzzles, and have the characters way too often make observations out loud like, "There's something strange about this," or, "This statement I've just pressed seems pretty suspicious. I think I should present something here." I know I'm not the first person to say this, but it's most likely they toned the challenge down for fans of one franchise that has no experience with the other. When I replayed it years later, having not played either franchise in a long time, I did find some difficulties. It's probably more fit for newcomers of the franchise, but I wouldn't recommend you play this game before playing the first 3 games of both, as you'd otherwise miss some funny references, and most importantly, and obviously, you won't get to know the characters as well, and all the moments they share in here will not have the same impact. However, it's not all bad. Even if it's easy, it doesn't mean it's unfun. Trials still have the usual twists, turns, and colorful cast of witnesses you'd expect of them. And they also had a mechanic that was unique at the time for Ace Attorney: multiple witness cross-examination. There's one testimony given by several people, causing contradictions not only with your evidence, but also between each other. One witness may know something that the rest doesn't, or may remember things differently, so pressing a statement could cause somebody else to react. Then you can move over to that person and question him or her. If you've played or seen the Great Ace Attorney duology, you'll have already an idea of how that goes, since that game reused the mechanic. However, I find in this game it's just much better. At first, it's actually a little less complex than in Great Ace Attorney, but it keeps evolving as you advance through the game, becoming less straightforward. Without spoiling anything, I can say the final trial has you do some crazy stuff. There's also another mechanic where you refute a statement with another statement, which is interesting in hindsight, since it feels like a simplified version of summation examinations. But it comes up very rarely, lasts very little, and works more or less like a multiple choice question, so it's not really that interesting to play. Layton's gameplay remains the same. Difficulty aside, puzzles are still engaging for the most part, though there are no minigames like the toy car or the camera, which some fans might miss. Personally, I didn't, since there is enough content as it is, both Layton's and overall. Worth noting as an interesting fact that puzzle master Akira Tago, always first to be credited, does not appear in this game's credits, making it the only Professor Layton game he wasn't involved in during his life. A common complaint I've seen about the game is that the professor hogs the spotlight, and I can't say it's wrong. The trials can be pretty long, and are some of the best parts of the game, and Phoenix and Maya do stuff outside, do not ignore at all, but Layton still shines more. During the beginning, this is especially true. It takes a bit of time for both duos to meet, and until then, it's focused much more on the professor. When they do finally meet, it's a great moment. But even after that, it still feels like Herschel Layton is carrying the plot by himself up to the second trial. Wright begins to get some deserved attention and to pull his weight by then, but it's after this trial is over that he and Maya become more or less equal to the other duo. As for the story itself, it is more on par with Layton too. The plot goes like this. In a dark and stormy night, Professor Layton and his apprentice Luke are visited by a strange girl named Espella, who carries a strange book and a letter from one of Layton's old students. The contents of the letter tell of a town named Labyrinthia that holds a mystery he can only entrust to the professor to solve. He asks him to help Spella and go to Labyrinthia to uncover whatever secret hides there. Of course, being the gentleman he is, Layton promises Spella he will help her, but the problem is she's being chased by witches who will stop at nothing to get her back. Things immediately go south for them, and soon they end up being brought into Labyrinthia against their will. On the other hand, Nick and Maya go to London in an exchange visit to represent the Legal League of America in a simple, unofficial, and uncomplicated trial. But things for them get weird too when they get involved in all the spell drama, leading to them also getting brought to Labyrinthia against their will. Labyrinthia is a weird town stuck in a medieval setting where people act and look like it was the olden days. It's a peaceful place full of friendly faces, led by the storyteller, a man worshipped as the creator of everything due to his ability to make anything he writes become true. But not all is sunshine and rainbows. Witches sometimes prey on the innocent people of Labyrinthia, and that's why the Knights exist. The Knights stop criminals and witches, and leading these protectors are the Inquisitors that ensure all witches get their punishment, working as equivalents to prosecutors. So we have our protagonist going to an odd town away from home, trying to solve a set of small mysteries in the vein of those games about the gentleman in a top hat, and the plot, while still being divided into episodes and even having more than any other Ace Attorney entry, feels far less episodic in its structure as time doesn't skip between them for the most part. More often than not, they start where the previous one left off, which includes trials as well. The story takes place in a relatively small span of time, but it's certainly pretty big. One may even call it over the top or crazy, especially if we compare it to the standard Ace Attorney plot. If you're not a fan of the professor's stories, chances are you won't like this one either. Now that's enough about the plot without getting into the details. I'll explain more later, so let's currently leave it at this. It's an unusual story that gets insane at times, but I'm fine with it. Even if partially because the presentation and the characters are so good that they help mitigate the flaws I find. So what about the characters? Well, the protagonists are the same as in their games. Good, lovable people all around, but the things they go through, the things they do, and the relationships they form with each other elevate this cast farther. You all get at least a few moments, and the game makes sure to explore the dynamic between every duo possible, which I think is the most important part about any crossover. That's why Smash Bros doesn't get my attention as more than a fighting game, for example. There's a huge selection from very different franchises, but when you're playing the games themselves instead of watching trailers or reading some internet webcomic, there's not that much interaction between characters besides beating each other up. I don't pretend to hate on Smash Brothers though. In the end, they chose to make it a fighting game and focus on that aspect, and in that regard it's very well done. Besides, in its current state with such a gigantic roster, it'd be hard to make a story mode where all interact with each other and have enough screen time without feeling bloated, even if I'd like to see them try. Professor Layton vs Phoenix Wright has the advantage of using a very small part of its franchise's cast, which again helps make the dynamic strong, although you may miss seeing more characters like Larry, Gumshoe, Flora, or Emmy. Things like the professor talking to Nick about puzzles, or Maya making her usual funny comments to a patient Layton who answers to her with his characteristic stoic tone are something I enjoyed watching. But it's Luke who I found to be the greatest. He's not as cool as Wright or as cool as Layton, but he's such a reliable little guy and he goes through so much, it's really endearing. Not to mention all the cute moments he has with everyone, especially with Maya. The friendship they form is really adorable and I enjoyed all their little exchanges. Funny thing, Maya just so happens to be the worst of the main four. Not due to her being a bad character, of course. She's written just as well as she was in the original trilogy, and she has her moments to shine, but the rest are just above her in my opinion. Perhaps it doesn't help that due to sharing time with them, she loses several opportunities to act as an assistant, unfortunately. Then there's all the original people. They have varied, striking designs that take from both series, although for the most part important characters use Ace Attorney designs, while the rest use the Professor Layton one, and the Layton style is a bit toned down due to an attempt from the designers to strike a balance between both art styles. The NPCs don't have the odd disproportions that you see from time to time, which is probably for the better or things would clash way too much. They already look weird as it is, and going further will have been pushing it. All the minor characters are there to fill the city and make it feel alive, which they do well. You might find one or two that you like too. Cecil and Petal, Lady Mailer, and Burley were my favorites. Some people who've played the game might find the last two annoying, but personally they crack me up, more so the latter. Also, Lady is cute and the design of her uniform is really neat. But what about the more important personalities? Well, focusing on the ones I can actually give an opinion about without mentioning spoilers, there's Bella and Inquisitor Zacharias Barham, this game's main prosecutor, and one so good that he's third place on my list, below Van Six and Edgeworth. He's something simple that works very well. There's no elaborate backstory or heartbreaking emotional journey for him, neither does he have much of a character arc. He's just a man with a strong suit of armor and stronger convictions, who takes his job seriously, and he's the man the town relies on and loves. The gallery from time to time shouts his name in praise like he's some sort of superstar, and he's got authority to go with that admiration. There's this one scene where the witnesses start bickering with each other in frustration, and instead of letting the judge call for order with his gavel, Barham just slams his desk and they all go silent. He also knows to roll with the punches. You can see he takes losses during the witch trials gracefully, learning from them quickly and adapting to Phoenix's methods on the fly. Really cool dude. I wish we could have seen more of him, but this being not a crossover game, what we've got is all there is. Then Bella is fine. I don't really have anything against her. She's a kind and selfless girl who tries her best and is always eager to help others, even doing what she can to help with the mysteries. Her backstory is also pretty developed and her design is good. That's all the positives I can say. There aren't many serious negatives I can think about, except maybe you could find her to be a bit repetitive in key moments of the plot. Overall, I find her to be good enough character to make me care about her. Nothing bad, but nothing exceptional either. Doesn't help she has 4 great characters by her side. It's the Maya problem but worse. She doesn't have the advantage of several games before this to show her qualities, so I try to be fair and look at the others without taking into account their previous stories. But even then she has a hard time comparing to them, and I can see players not caring about her as a result. In which case I imagine those players will enjoy the story significantly less since it's such an important part of it. Her voice acting is fine, which applies to the whole cast honestly. I can't speak for all languages, but the English and the original Japanese show lots of talent. I'll focus on the English one though, because that's the language this video is, and you can't change the language of the voices without changing the text too, which means I haven't really experienced the original ones as much. If you're an American, you'll notice this game is particularly British, which sounds obvious. I mean, you expect to hear British accents in a Professor Layton game, but what I mean is that both Europe and America got the former's localization instead of having one for each, meaning you might hear a lot of voices you've never heard before. Voices are used during key moments, which help accentuate their importance or in some cases helps make them funnier. Every other time a beeping sound is used for dialogue. There is something that gets my attention about it. It's not really a flaw or anything, but I found it weird that it uses the beeping sounds of Ace Attorney for most characters, with the sole exception of Layton, Luke, Chemley, and Barton, who use the one from their games. I thought it would use one or the other depending on the style of design used for the character, but instead these 4 remain as the only ones. Even the constable at London uses the Ace Attorney bleeps. Anyways, back to more serious commentary. The professor is still voiced by Christopher Robin Miller, doing a convincing accent through the power of acting. Maya gets her first English voice from USA actress Samantha Dakin, while Phoenix, instead of being voiced by his original and current English actor Sam Riegel, is played by Canada-born actor Trevor White. But the most noteworthy is Luke, who uses his English voice. You see, in America Luke is voiced by Lana Minella, but for the European releases he was redubbed by Maria Darling. The reason I've always seen is that Minella's accent wasn't convincing, and they had to recast her for British audiences, which is a believable story, but I haven't seen official confirmation of it. Either way, if you're used to Lana Minella, it'll be weird having Luke's voice be so different. Even so, both Nick and him still sound good to me. Much like with Maya, I feel these voices fit them well and their acting is on point. Every single speech bubble when character shouts is dubbed, no matter how small a role the character shouting has. The third trial has some spectacular voice acting at the end, and and the rest of voice scenes don't fall far behind. I'd love to ramble about them, but I don't want to waste time with that. Until after the spoiler-free section. It really is all fantastic, aside from a few times with Wright where he doesn't emote as much during gameplay. Fortunately, in cutscenes that doesn't happen. The cutscenes, yeah. What's a level 5 game without them, huh? However, this time, rather than letting PA works to the 2D cinematics, it was done by animation studio Bones, making it the only Layton game without videos by the former studio. The Professor Layton characters look good as ever, but this was also the first time fans got to see Nick and Maya fully animated in game, at least in Japan, and they did a good job bringing them to life. The 3D models and their animations are neat too. The transition from 2D to 3D is nicely done overall. They did a faithful recreation of some of the classic poses and others that are similar but not exactly the same, although breakdowns and pain animations during the trials I felt were weaker. Many of the witnesses were more subdued in their movements and Phoenix's sucked expression is not as good as in the DS sprites, but more serious expressions look good and convey the feelings just right, with Phoenix's being the best. I also like the little animations when you solve puzzles that the characters have. And the soundtrack. Well, what do you expect to get when you mix two games with beautiful musical scores? You'd be hard pressed not to have good music. There's remixes from both sides, with some very obvious picks, such as Professor Layton's theme or the original Pursuit, Corner the Culprit, which I feel gets used too much in the first trial, and there are also some less expected ones like The Dark Forest from Pandora's Box, or Diabolical Box. The original compositions are just as good. Mass Inquisition Allegro, for example, is an expertly done tune that takes cues from both series' soundtrack and mixes them into something unique and fitting for Labyrinth's Skirt. Barham's theme is amazing, so is The Winning Combination and The Final Witness 2. There's lots of good ones. But what's even better is Cornered, Spellbreaker, one of the best tunes used when pointing out contradictions. Let me make this clear. I'm not saying it's one of the best trial tunes in this game, or that it's one of the best objection themes in the series. What I am saying is that if you put all objection, pursuit, and the truth confessed compositions in the franchise in one list, a Spellbreaker stands very high. And the only reason I don't call it number 1 is because I can't quite decide whether it is in first place or in an unmervilled second place to Pursuit, Corner the Culprit. That's how good I consider it. It's a masterpiece in an already phenomenal soundtrack. There's many other things I could talk fondly about, but let's not spend all day here, shall we? So, would I recommend this game? Of course! If you're into both series and haven't played it, you should do it. If you're a fan of one of the franchises and haven't played the other, then I also recommend this game. But it bears repeating, I believe you should play at least the first 3 games of both before going for this. Also worth saying a second time, if you're not into the more wild and over-the-top tale of Professor Layton, the story might end up leaving you dissatisfied. But even then, I think all the character moments could make it worth it for you. And if you like Ace Attorney's court drama, you gotta see the third trial. It's full of twists, with a truly compelling story that flows well from one point to another and memorable characters. So while it's not hard by the standards of Ace Attorney, in fact I'd say it's pretty easy by such standards, it's still a very fun trial. The game as a whole took me 33 hours and 17 minutes by playing patiently and exploring, although I didn't do a 100% run. You can get the game for the Nintendo 3DS, and that's about it. I don't see it getting on PC being realistic, but it'd be nice if they released at least for the Nintendo Switch or whatever other new machine the company makes so it can be played on a high resolution without the visuals taking a hit in the process. And that's all I'm saying before jumping into spoiler territory. Not literally everything I say will be spoilers, but this is the best time to stop watching if you want to go play the game and want to avoid getting the story ruined. Okay? Ready? Set? Let's go! There's so many great moments in this game, like when Layton and Luke finally meet Phoenix and Maya. You'd think it'd be a dramatic scene, but then all of a sudden... Welcome! Nick as a baker is not how I imagined this reunion. It's something I couldn't have ever come up with, and it gave me a good laugh. This whole amnesia thing is worth that joke, but it also gave way to Phoenix slowly getting back all his skills, and starting with that first objection, which is a great moment too. The man gets some well-earned respect. The Labyrinthians throw a lot of shit at him, especially at the start, and you can't blame them since he's only some baker spouting nonsense in their eyes. But by the end they make a freaking golden statue of him and Layton. A testament of how despite everything he's as worthy of praise as the Professor, who has nothing but good things to say of him by the time you reach the Storyteller's Tower. Even the judge says he sees him as a knight on par with Inquisitor Barham. the same Inquisitor who also admits he's the first one who managed to fight him as an equal. I agree Layton gets the most spotlight, but I can't agree with the notion that Phoenix doesn't get respect. There are some jokes at his expense. The biggest one where they revealed at the end that he and Maya were only brought to the city due to a coincidence. But in no way is Phoenix, or Maya for that matter, treated like a joke. Maya and Luke searching for spells cat Eve was a cute moment. I also liked Luke's scenes with Phoenix in chapter 5. Two dudes who've gone through a lot of hardship trying to be there for each other. When Phoenix takes advantage of his one moment of solitude at the tavern to finally let out his feelings of anguish, and Luke sees this and stops Bella from going down so he can vent without getting bothered, that was considerate of him. The huge cross-examination against 10 knights is an idea insane enough that I love it, despite my reservations with the final trial. Even with each character only making one statement, the testimonies are huge and confusing. It feels like a logical end to the concept of multiple witness cross-examinations, and the barrage of objections looks neat. The actual fight against the storyteller's guard is awesome, short as it is. The part where Luke passes the sword to the professor and he calmly says,
"Thank you, my boy,"
before turning towards the knights. That's a good stuff right there. Although after beating the game something becomes odd about it. They make a pretty good job of establishing the storyteller as a somber but well-meaning man who causes bad things in an attempt to do good and is honestly regretful for what he's done. But here he's actively trying to get people killed, and one of them is a kid. I doubt there are shades here to prevent them from actually dying, since if that were the case he could have just knocked them out and he wouldn't have needed the guards. This is a very evil moment. Was it caused by desperation, or was he just being a jerk? Either way, this is a strangely low point for him. Kira's death is a moment that stuck with me on the first playthrough. Her breakdown is nothing interesting. The voice acting when she shows her true colors didn't do it for me. But once she was put into the cage and she started begging for her life, it changed. Seeing her bleeding to the curb to release her and burn spells so the witch trials can end, trying to keep the last part of the Iron Maiden open with her hands so she can keep talking until eventually it closes on her and it all goes silent. That was chilling. It's easy to see Barham as a douche when he condemns her to burn with a smile on his face during the scene, but from his point of view, he's doing the right thing. That's part of what makes him so great. As you advance the story, you can see he really believes his cause is righteous. He cares for the good of his town and withholding the law above all else. Just in his first trial, he admonishes his witnesses when they break the law, scolds them for not taking things seriously when they're bickering, and up until she's proven to be a witch, he stands up for Kira, clearly not amused by fake witchery accusations. His honesty is best shown after the third trial, when he admits Maya's quote-unquote death is his fault. That scene is so good. Phoenix is truly pissed like you've never seen him before. In his eyes, Barham is a hypocrite who's unjustly killed an innocent woman. And what does Barham do when he sees this man who seems just ready to beat him up? He gives him permission to take his sword and strike him with it, if he so wishes. Then he tells the group the safest way to escape from the guards. This shows he's willing to be punished for his failures, and hints at him doubting Spella is truly Bezella despite claiming to be her. It all culminates with him refusing to call her a witch until she's completely proven to be one in the trial, even after seeing her apparently cast a magic spell in front of a crowd. His character development is very short and simple, but it's another good side of him. Darklaw just doesn't compare as a rival. Back to the Golden Court. I truly think it's as good as I said before. Barham is good as ever, but Phoenix is way above him in this one. During the second half you see him act all serious and competent, and it's a fantastic reminder why he's called an ace attorney in the USA. The witnesses change often and bring a lot of entertaining moments, not overstaying the welcome. Emir is hilarious as always. Yeah, I didn't mention him before because he only appears in trials and is meant to be a surprise. Letty had some cute moments as well, and even gives way to one of the odd times where the judge does something funny. Who can forget Cracker the Parrot? They also have a spell taking as assistant while Mai is busy being hanged in a cage, which was nice from a story perspective, even if I could have done without a hand holding. The part where she explains to Nick what a courier was got a little chuckle from me. As for the witch, Grey Earl is a wonderful character and she would be maybe my favorite killer in the Ace Attorney series if she actually was a killer. She really was a tragic person driven to desperation, which made seeing her in chapter 5 alive and helping the main characters sneak past the guards a pleasant surprise. You don't get to know her for that long before she's about to be executed, but the writing and the voice acting made me feel for her. When she reads Newton Beldick's letter is a very powerful moment. The alchemist sounds determined, unafraid and ready to die, but you can feel the sorrow in his voice. The guilt that burdens him because of the secrets he can't reveal. When he mentions his last words to Grail got to me especially. How he only thanks her for bringing him his drink as usual despite wanting to say more, knowing if he did, she'd catch on to it. The idea of having the chance to give some parting words to your loved ones but just not being able to is awful. And it only gets worse as it switches between Belduc and Grail reading the letter, with her in the end breaking and in the verge of tears. The voice work in this scene is phenomenal, the best in the game for me. And what comes right after doesn't fall very far behind.
There is nothing else we can do. This is the course of things, and you should know it well.
Indeed, all witches shall be cast into the flames. That is the law of this town. A law that was written by your very own father. And furthermore, a law that has always been obeyed in the town of Labyrinthia.
A town like this should never exist in the first place.
What? Such insolence!
That's heresy! She's criticizing the storyteller's story! Even the storyteller's daughter has no right to criticize the story!
Trials in which innocent people are sentenced to death by fire. I shall make sure this is the last one.
That moment gives me shivers. Although they didn't give Luke the right mouth shape when speaking. While he's quiet, his eyes and mouth look serious, but when he opens his mouth, it looks happy. What happens next is what baffles me truly, however. Maya jumps back into the cage to open it and save Spella, convincing her to be not fine with burning and jump to safety. Then the knights pull a real dick move. Due to inertia, Maya falls inside the cage and the door closes. The knight who's up there with her doesn't say anything. I'll give him some credit though. I originally thought it was his fault that the door closed, and it kinda looks like he's trying to keep it shut. But looking back, he was just holding on for dear life, and his hand is nowhere that could block the cage. So he might have had no intention to harm Maya and he couldn't manage to do anything before being thrown off. The knight who brings the cage down into the fire I can't excuse, even if he didn't see who was in the cage and assume it was Spella, which would mean he could have also burned that one knight by accident. It's still astounding, cause all the while the rest of knights just stand there looking, two of them even restraining Phoenix so he can't do anything to stop it. Either these guys are the biggest morons or they're just douchebags. On the other hand, the visuals and the voice acting make the video retain its emotional pull. Phoenix's voice acting here doesn't falter, and it results in a heart-wrenching scream. So despite these problems, it doesn't manage to sully the story or the events that happen due to the scene. I think this opinion mirrors the bigger issues I have with the ending. And now here's one more scene I find odd before I talk of the ending. The first witch trial is preceded by a scene of a woman burning. The characters react in horror like you'd expect of them, but then there's a fade to black and it jumps into the actual trial in a very sudden manner, with Nick and Maya not shocked anymore as if they forgot it already. It kind of threw me off. Anyways, the last stretch of the game is where I find the greatest problems. I don't think this is an unpopular opinion. For starters, let's mention Barham yet once again. I said Darklow didn't compare as a rival, but I'm not against her taking the role of Inquisitor. In fact, I think it was the right choice, since it's so important for the big revelation at the end. The problem is in how they decided to get rid of Barham, just tossing him into some jail, and never seeing him again until the end, where he drives a speedboat, and his last words, at least until the DLC, are... not exactly the best send-off speech, don't you think? It was cool that he still found a way to help by sending his dog to warn Luke and the professor about the Storyteller's Tower. But I wish he had done something more by himself, like escape from prison to help Wright, or run from the knights to escort Layton and maybe even fight alongside him against the Storyteller's Guard. Even having him standing side by side with Darklow would have been fine. If Layton and Phoenix can do it, so can the Inquisition. The man wasn't even there to see the town's secret getting unveiled. For someone who seems like the main persecutor of the game, he gets screwed badly. And the trial itself got on my nerves with the little evidence you use. For the final trial, it's already low on evidence, but only a portion are used commonly. As a result, you use multiple times the same things and it feels repetitive. The pendant and the footprint sketch are presented 4 times each, while on the other hand, you never present the Vigilantes' report. And the last piece of evidence you show is one that was given to you recently and you haven't used yet, making it pretty obvious. Once a storyteller arrives, there's a lot of heavy stuff being revealed, and we're going to talk about it right now. But first, let me explain about the issues I have with it from a gameplay perspective. From this point on, it all becomes a breeze. Cool concepts with execution so easy it isn't funny. Arthur Cantabella's testimony consists only of pressing every statement. Spella's final testimony has you simply pressing one questioning at obvious points. And the parts where you play as the Inquisition are so easy, they might as well be automatic. It reminds me of a Danganronpa ending. I'm not spoiling anything if you haven't played any of them, but every main game of that franchise ends in a huge exposition dump, where rather than letting you figure out a mystery, they shove it all down your throat while throwing some super easy questions and minigames from time to time. That way you do something more than just move from dialogue box to dialogue box. That's how this felt to me, like a smaller version of one of those finales. If it were easy to figure out, it would annoy me a bit, this being the last case, but I could still have fun with it. The problem is you're not solving anything. The game does it for you. But how were those revelations? Were they worth the exposition dump? No. I wish you actually had to solve things, and the quality of the reveal doesn't change that. Still, the revelations were quite interesting to say the least. The whole town was hallucinating the witches through the power of tainted water and suggestion, so it was all a big lie. But don't worry, the people in there were still real. A reveal like this should be a bummer to me, yet I'm surprisingly fine with that part of the plot twist. It helps that I'm used to Professor Layton games having insane explanations, but I believe it's mainly because they don't dismiss what came before in the game for this. Everything that seemed important throughout the story keeps being relevant, even if it's in a different way than expected, and they try as best as they can to explain it. Although these explanations just don't cut it for me as well as they intended. Sure, getting people to join the memory erasing experiment can be easy. I fully believe there are actually a lot of people who would gladly lose all their memories for a chance at a new life, sad as it may be. The hard part is keeping the lie up. For most of the duration of Labyrinthia, the bell tower was hidden under pure black covers that were invisible to people. That's why it seemed to magically appear 3 months before the game. That's fine, but did nobody really ever bump into it by accident? I doubt they put guards there to protect what looked like nothing. What about all the machines? Did nobody ever trip with one or, again, bump into one? Did they kidnap the people and turn them into shades for accidentally finding the truth? Or maybe just brainwash them every time it happened? And who is this woman? She gets to go outside and list the witches to the shades, but doesn't look or act like a shade herself. Why is she tasked with something that could potentially lead to her finding the truth about the town? Does she actually know the truth? Why isn't it a bigger deal that the government is behind this whole experiment? The government was helping Arthur Cantabella and his company with Labyrinthia as a way to research a drug that made the people susceptible to hypnosis. Why would they want this? This is very worrying stuff, but nobody seems to care about the government researching methods of mind controlling the populace. And there's nothing proving they aren't, not even some aside comment. I suppose everything is fine since nobody gets turned into a mind-controlled zombie in the epilogue, but it's still weird that the only concern we see is Phoenix saying, "I can't believe the government was supporting all that." And during the part at London, if spells work by knocking the victim out and changing things while they sleep, why did Darklow capture Luke's disguise? Since they had passed out, she had all the time she wanted to check if it was really spell under that cloak. She should have either grabbed Luke or nothing at all, not just the cloak. Oh well, let's just say it was theatrics, yeah, that. On the subject of Luke, the boy is magical. He's with Layton when he steps into the final witch trial, but after the video ends he's not there anymore. Maybe he ran away to do that crash course on operating cranes, but then he's with the group when Spella tries jumping to her death, and he even talks, yet nobody reacts to this. Then once Spella and Darklow start falling, he's nowhere to be found until Layton reveals he was operating the crane. Also, Darklow's clothes changed when she appears at the tower to help Spella. These are continuity errors that I'm surprised weren't fixed. Maybe I could dismiss the Luke part with a short explanation like Luke came to see what the commotion was about, but then quickly ran to the crane to save the girls. But that's just me making things up, and it wouldn't even fix the Darklow error. The truth, as much as it annoys me, is that these probably were the result of one of the rewrites the game went through. So yeah. Those are some serious problems I have with the game, but even if I can't talk for a long time about them, the good far outweighs the bad for me. There's still a good amount of things I like about the ending. For example, Layton as an Inquisitor is boring gameplay-wise due to the lack of challenge, but as a part of the story it's not so bad a way to end things, making the verses in the title finally mean something. Labyrinthia's origin story was part of an insane exposition dump, but I like how it all started as a little innocent lie to make Spella behave, which led to more lies to deal with her trauma, and that spiraled out of control until eventually creating a whole town because Arthur was too afraid of his daughter or Darklo remembering the truth. Seeing how big this man's fabrications get is exaggerated, but really goes to show his desperation. The way he starts demanding they stop the trial when the truth is close to being uncovered because he's gone too far to go back on his stories becomes all the more poignant because none of it would have been necessary if it weren't for that one story about Bezella. If he had actually told the truth about the Bell's effect, perhaps nothing would have gone wrong. The flashback to Newton Belduke and Arthur Cantabell's younger days was nice. Darklo is not my favorite character of the game, but she is good. Her motivation is simple and makes sense. Revenge for her father's death is nothing strange, and it ties into the same theme of sorts about how telling little lies can create a spiral of deception that only causes more harm, the same as the storyteller. The difference is she was simultaneously withholding the lie to the town and deceiving herself unknowingly due to childhood trauma. I can't believe that, yeah. Causing the death of a whole town by accident is a bit stressful, isn't it? The design is cool too. I know, not a surprising comment from me. The claw is a bit on the nose, too big of a hand on her being evil. Other than that, the cat inspiration with the little things on her hair goes well with her character to contrast with the other Inquisitor. While he's a loyal guard dog who protects his people, she has a more aloof nature that conceals a softer, kind attitude deep down. Of course, it's also a hint to her relation to Spella, an actually subtle one. Once Darklo, or Eve as it's actually called, finds out the truth that it wasn't Spella who caused the incident that started everything, she's quick to make up for her actions by running to save her, not letting her go even if it means falling to her death, and even trying to cushion her fall by shielding her. Despite everything, in the end she shows how much she cared for her old friend. And Layton pointing, it's completely useless knowing that it was Luke who saved the girls. Which makes it better to me because that means the professor is just being needlessly dramatic. Then both Phoenix and him point together one last time and it's awesome. All the machinery appearing looks gorgeous in that typical Professor Layton fashion. The sun rising, marking the new beginning for Labyrinthia, is spectacular. In the end, seeing everyone well and happy made it all worth it. Arthur, Spella and Eve are reunited and free to live without the burden of their traumatic past, and find a new home in the old Labyrinthia with all of its citizens opting to stay there, but this time without running away from reality or their memories. After all they've gone through, I was happy for them. Even if neither of them was my favorite character, I grew to care for Spella and Eve and it warmed my heart to see this. And then everybody waves goodbye to the gang as they leave the town, with both Layton and Phoenix expressing their respect and admiration to each other, while Maya and Luke promise they'll all meet again, a testament to the bond they've developed through their adventure. What can I say that I haven't said before? I love it. Oh, and I'm glad they kept the running gag of ending on an objection too. And also, Edgeworth is there, although his voice is weird, I don't think it suits him. I get that he's a bit more fancy than Wright, but here he sounds pompous and strangely British. Probably because he was voiced by a British man. So yeah, that's the game. There's the extra chapters, but I can't record footage from them because of course I can't download the DLC on an emulator. I remember playing them on my 3DS and they were fun. If you like the characters, you get to see more of them and what they've been doing with their life for a year after the ending. And there's some fourth wall breaking jokes and explanations about behind the scenes stuff. Also they tell the backstory of Constantine, Barham's dog. The concept art and commentary is also a nice reward. Before replaying this game for the sake of the review, I was expecting to come out of it with a bit of a lower opinion on it since it had been so long since I last played it. I could have forgotten about some issues and knowing the plot twist at the end already could make the story less interesting. But I was happily proven wrong. I more or less enjoyed it the same as the first time in the end. As for any ideas on possible videos about other games in either franchise? Not really. I like those games, but I don't feel a strong desire to talk about them in detail. And neither do I think I have anything of interest to say. I've already sung praises of one game. More would be repetitive. Bottom line, the game was good, and I wish you an even better day.